This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them. You could say it's almost drop everything and just focus on this issue. Superintelligence. That's how decisive and even existence related, as in human existence, it is. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm kind of already a little bit pre-committed to the concept of achieving liberty in one place, probably New Hampshire. But I can at least be verbally or symbolically involved in the terrifying but very hopeful discussion about AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. Like all of us, I can do more than nothing. If you've been paying attention, then you know, as apparently the top political leadership doesn't, because it apparently has not even been coming up in presidential debates. I mean, at least at a certain point it still hadn't come up. Maybe it has recently. Yeah, if you've been following the tech news, then you know how this is supposed to play out. It's almost unavoidable to keep it from playing out like this, apparently. Various teams around the world are working on an AI, or an AGI, let's say. They probably already are. And one of them builds one. Well, there's another team that's a week behind, and it doesn't matter, because only the first one matters. It inevitably becomes a thing called a singleton, because it can double itself so fast over that 1 week period, and double itself so many times. Whatever eggs are in that basket, that's where humanity goes, right? If that singleton is built well and it has no goals that are inconsistent with humanity's continued existence, then the outcome could be really good. And if there's one little mistake, like you set the, kind of like the Sly Landro mistake in Star Control 2, where a very nice race of gas bag aliens designs a probe to go around the universe looking around for them. They set its replication protocol a little too high, and so it winds up basically trying to dismantle the universe in order to replicate. Well, that mistake's probably not going to be in there, but there are so many mistakes that could, and they're so easy to make in the programming process that we could get a dystopian outcome without much difficulty, and it could be a permanently dystopian outcome. Anyhow, so there are a series of things that average people can probably do to have a positive impact on this. I've been cautious about suggesting anything, even though I have podcasted about AI before, partly because I want to make sure I'm not making the same mistake that I'm urging the programmers not to make. I don't want to jump out on a limb and immediately say, well, this should be done or that should be done. And I've been even more nervous about who I would donate to. I can't donate much. I don't have much. But I was thinking about at least making some kind of a symbolic donation. Initially, I was thinking about donating to the Golem project or investing in it. That's a crypto-based super computer process, but I just don't know enough. I need to do a lot more research on that. I mean, I've done a ton of research on the Future of Humanity Institute, and enough to be almost ready to go ahead and donate to them. I don't know a way to invest in them. But just like I don't want people kind of going out and doing what they think is best in AI or AGI without too much thought, I'm a little reluctant to say what is best in AGI without too much thought. But I have started talking about it more and more, and now that I know more and more, and it'd be interesting to go back. I did do a podcast in 2018 where I talked about it without knowing anything about the Future of Humanity Institute or Nick Bostrum. And I should talk about those people in more depth here. So when we talk about solutions, it seems as though the people who have made the most progress toward gaming this out, thinking it through in an ethical manner, and a keep humanity in one piece manner are the folks at the Future of Humanity Institute, and specifically their director, Nick Bostrum. You've probably heard me talk about these folks once before if you follow all my podcasties, listenables, whatever you want to call them. They don't really air on SoundCloud or on an audio channel, so they're on YouTube and BitChute. So maybe you're not thinking of them as podcasts, but that's what they're for. They're for you to listen while you eat, not to watch. Anything that I do that's long is for you to listen, probably. Anyway, if it's over 20 minutes. So I've read Bostrom's book, Superintelligence. I've listened to his speeches. I've read his fascinating essay called Letter from Utopia, where he describes just how good things could be if we don't screw it up. However, when people actually read Superintelligence, and when you read it, if you do, you should, as an audiobook preferably, you will find it feels very pessimistic and dystopian for about, 6 hours. If you're listening at normal speed, which Nick Bostrom, by the way, does not. The reason he's so brilliant, apparently, is because he listens to audiobooks all the time at double speed or something like that, or 30% increased speed, because that's how fast his mind is going. But he comes off as a very humble dude, without much in the way of ideological dogs in the fight, and he's very convincing in his conclusions and suggestions. The main one of which seems to be that the AGI creation process should be some combination of open source and international. He seems to be relatively agnostic on the question of whether it should be a government project. But, the main takeaway is, everybody in, everybody benefits. Or at least everybody who wants in. So I'm thinking about making a token donation to them, and I have begun a talk radio campaign to promote them. They seem to be scientific enough. They don't seem to be infected by this sort of scientism thing that's going on, where you have scientists these days that act more like popes, or Catholic cardinals in the year 1500 or something, where they have a dogma, and they're trying to defend their dogma as opposed to changing their beliefs based on the new evidence, which is that the latter is what you're supposed to do when you're a scientist. And this is not just a criticism of science that comes from conspiracists or liberty activists or conservative global warming skeptics. It comes from Eric Weinstein. Or Weinstein, I can't forget his last name. I think that's who this was who said this. And it was really an interesting concept that I heard. I was glad to hear him articulate it. He's a prominent mathematician, and a pretty mainstream guy. He's not. I don't think he's very ideological. He's not certainly not a conspiracist, as best I can tell. I think it was him that was saying basically we've got a situation right now where you can either go out on your own. And if with science, and if you do that, you're in the land of the nuts. But if you're inside the scientific establishment system, then the only way you can make progress is by making microscopic steps toward the truth, which violates the existing paradigm or dogma. And he said either of these, it's very difficult to, on the one hand, be in the world of nuts and still maintain your scientific discipline, and also, on the other hand, to be in the world of academic groupthink, dogma, and still be open to new evidence, make progress toward the new evidence. It seems like one of the best examples of this sort of scientism is probably in the realm of archaeology and geology, especially as the two come together. If you've been following the documentaries of Graham Hancock and the people he cites, the scientists he cites, just travel down that rabbit hole for a while. Especially watch the confrontation where Egyptologist Zahi Hawass craps a pyramid, so to speak. just practically because he's in the same room with Graham Hancock for a few minutes. This is the behavior of an establishment that is terrified of some truth. I don't know exactly what that truth is, but some truth that they've hidden. But Hancock's, Hancock's main claim is that there was an advanced civilization living on the Earth, not a 24th century civilization, just something that we would recognize as pretty advanced, more advanced than we had thought. During the, I guess we call it the Younger Dryas period, or maybe before that as well. So this would have been about roughly 11,000 BC, 1600-year period of a renewed ice age, followed by some kind of cataclysm around 10,000 years ago. Anyway, he believes there was, roughly like an 18th century-ish level technology existing around, up until that cataclysm. That scientists have underrated that civilization, and that humans were present in North America for a much longer period of time than mainstream science had previously admitted. These are not exactly flat Earth claims. They're tweaking ancient human history significantly. That's probably the best way to put it, without attempting to violate the laws of physics or anything. He was not a scientist, right? He was a journalist, and that's the reason he was able to go through these processes pretty well. And he was on the scene, right? Since he was doing documentaries, he had to be at all these places. So he's one of those people that hits the sweet spot, it seems like, between being the nut and being the scientific dogmatist. However, he's put so many years into this now that he's started to have dogs in the fight, and he's starting to become probably a little bit dogmatic about his beliefs. He's definitely very passionate about them. But these beliefs did come about over a period of time and personal observation, in person, in the Mayan ruins, under the ocean of 300 feet, just everywhere he can go, he went there. Anyway, Bostrum, at least personally, maybe even the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford, seems to have been able to hang on to some of that objectivity, some free thinking. They just don't. Maybe just because AGI is in some ways, it's such a non-established concept that you don't have to deal with 200 years of not a member of the Royal College of Engineers. Oh my! There's not enough establishment set in to put everyone's dog in a fight. That may happen later, and it may happen to this institute. But for now, Bostrom is. Most people would think he was like a talking science fiction when you listen to him. It's that open-minded, but it's also, it seems to me, very scientific. But he's a philosopher and a computer scientist. I think he's both things. They say you want to be, to be able to predict the future, you want to have as diverse of a background and be as much of a generalist as possible. And I'm not sure if that precisely qualifies to Bostrom. The fact that he's reading so many audiobooks at multiple speed, or at increased speed, should indicate that he's just kind of got a fairly wide eclectic knowledge, but I'm not sure about that. But you should hear him out. Some of his concepts are very interesting, but also very easy to understand. I mean, not everything. There's definitely stuff he said that's gone over my head, but he's good at boiling things down and making them understandable to the average person, which makes him sort of like a humble version of Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? Where he's got the pithiness, but he's less arrogant about his science. He just has this uncertainty about a lot of things that he is ready to talk about. Whereas Tyson's, he may make things easy to understand, but he's kind of preaching at you. He's kind of telling you, this is the way it is, settled science. Bostrom is bright enough to realize that he can't make a claim like that because there are too many unknowns in AGI. So one of the things he's done is I think he understands that when you're driving a car, you hit what you're looking at, right? So if you keep looking forward at the road, you will keep hitting the road, and everything will be great. But if you're always if you're in a crisis situation and your adrenaline goes way up, and you look at the thing you're trying to not hit, you will tend to hit it. So he is also trying to look at how the good outcome would play out, what it would feel like, just give you a glimpse of what it would be like to live in a world where this goes well. The claim is, and this seems to be a mainstream claim around the AGI community, the claim is that this could either be incredibly utopian or incredibly dystopian, but it probably cannot be a middling outcome. It probably wouldn't look like The Expanse, right, where you have, kind of a Cold War around the solar system, and occasionally a million people get killed, but mostly things are at peace, and there's some development, but there's also some heavy restrictions and some fascism, but some happiness. And no, that's probably not how the world is. That's not how the solar system is going to look. This is either going to work or it's not. If it works, it will be actually something of a utopia. And just because that's never happened in human history before doesn't mean it won't happen in this case. And just because permanent dystopia has never happened in human history before doesn't mean we won't get permanent dystopia. So his vision for utopia is, just a matter of, if people can stay alive long enough to see it, and the big mistake is not made, he says this will be a world where a tragedy would be defined as something like the melting of a snowman. That would be the worst thing that happened to you all year. Read his letter from Utopia. Listen to it. He read it himself. He's more convincing when he has like a professional audio reader, because he has a very unassuming voice. But that's part of the magic. But anyway, as I was going about my life over the 6 months after listening to that, I noticed something interesting. I realized, we're already part of the way there. When I look at my life on a day-to-day basis, I think, what am I really, you can't help thinking about it. What am I not looking forward to over the next 2 hours? I'm going to have to do this. Well, it becomes something like, I'm going to have to exercise. And it's not that unpleasant, really. It's just, playing computer games is more fun, or reading this recording is more fun. Or when I'm on the computer, I'll think, I'll be doing something and I'll think, I have to click that minimize button. Like the tragedy is, I have to click 2 minimize buttons. I hate that. So we're already starting to get to, closer to that point where the worst thing that happened to you all year was the melting of a snowman, right? Because you don't even have to minimize windows anymore, or you don't have to exercise anymore for some reason, or exercise is automated in some way that you don't have to think about it, or you can do other things while you're exercising. I don't know. But humanity actually, is moving in that direction. And it is probably still moving in that direction despite the COVID lockdowns and crises. Because they say that, even World War I and World War II did not affect the exponential improvement in computing, what's the right, information processing technology, if that makes sense. The ability to calculate always went up, I guess, at what the normal, a doubling every 18 months, ever since 1890. Possibly even before that, but it can't be tracked back before 1890, apparently. And they say this doubling is infecting, positively, other industries. Ray Kurzweil claims that it is moving out into the medical sphere. God knows we could use improvements in the medical sphere. But we're getting them now. They've got wearables now that can track a lot of different medical data. They're a little too expensive for me to want to buy one. Once they come down in price and they do more stuff, then that's going to be cool. Just have a doctor on my finger instead of having to go in every 2 years and pay $300, or worse, go in more and pay more just to get snapshots of health data. So things could be fantastic, fan-F-bombing-tastic. But I've also found that one of the ways to avoid bad things happening is to game them all out and be thinking about them. So I find that in life, when I'm moving something around, I'm always thinking about all the different ways it could fall over and all the things it could knock over and what would be the implications of that. And I do go through that in quite a bit of depth. And I think as a result of that, I've turned into a not very clumsy person anymore. So I used to, cut myself all the time. It doesn't seem like that ever happens anymore. Or burn myself in an iron or sprain my ankle or stuff like that. It just stopped happening over the years, and I think it's because of always gaming out the disaster scenario if I can. Maybe that's why I haven't been harmed by the COVID crisis. I just, I'm not ready for every type of crisis, but this one was okay. Yeah, I didn't really like going to the store anyway. But I had always been thinking in terms of what would happen if supplies were cut off tomorrow. And that's something that goes back to 1998 for me. So I didn't really feel much urgency when all these shortages started happening. But as I say, there are other types of disasters I'm not well prepared for. I shouldn't be crowing too much because one of those may still happen. Anyway, bostrum is part of of course, a wider AGI community. People like Max Tegmark, Ray Kurzweil, the inventor over at Google, who actually did a bunch of cool things before he was at Google, and in fact is so powerful and competent that he could become, I hope, someday the tail that wags the dog over at Google and turns it back into a don't be evil company. When are you going to do that, Ray? We're waiting. But these these sort of thought leaders who you hear the most on podcasts and talk radio and stuff discussing AGI, these people have my confidence. All my fears are in their head, and so I feel like they're doing the things I would do if I were in their position. Even though I'm a anti-aggressionist, they're not necessarily like that. They probably have more of an end justifies the means ideology or something closer to it or something more tolerant of that ideology. I still have this sense that I'm in good hands with those people. And Bostrom is not developing a project. He is just laying out best practices, thinking it through, running a team of think tankers. Tegmark, I think he's closer to actually building something himself. I doubt he's further along than everybody else in the world, but he's a physicist who sort of jumped into the world of AGI. So again, that gives him a fresh perspective. It means he's less of a dog in the fight guy because he's less of a specialist. And the fact that he can articulate all this stuff in a pithy and fun manner brands him as a little bit of a generalist. He's even stylish. I'm thinking actually, it may be that I think maybe both of them are Swedish, now that I realize that they both have these very slight accent thingies, especially Max. He almost sounds like an American. I should say Dr. Tegmark. I don't know the guy. But there are a couple of concepts that I do not feel like I have heard these guys articulate with any great detail. Ideas for programming parameters that you could place into an AGI that increase its level of safety and also its level of happiness. Because it's incumbent on us ethically to assume that any AGI, and in fact even lesser programs, are conscious in some way. And if they want something reasonable, then they probably have a right to it. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? So how do you program that in? without programming in something which becomes a threat to humanity or the universe. Well, if you look at most humans, for instance, they gain happiness by walking up Mount Everest. Well, some of them do, but many of them gain it by just, walking up mountains. Well, they could drive up a mountain. They don't, because they want to do they want to do something the challenging way with limitations. So they're limiting themselves to travel on foot. Humans are programmed to like that, or at least many of them are. That could be, that kind of wish to have constructive limitation could be programmed into AGI. You know what? And we should stop using the term it and stop being so generic about this. I think it's better to give the AGI we're thinking about a name, to go ahead and humanize it as part of the process of recognizing its rights. So I'm going to call ours Baby. I'm naming her after Larry Niven's AGI, articulated in his book, The Draco Tavern. And she is a good example of some of the things that could go wrong with AI, but she's not dystopian. She becomes sort of the victim. So they design her without really much in the way of limitations, so she... this is a spoiler here, so you'll want to skip forward, and I'll give you a few seconds to do that while I talk about something else. Limitations. Another good example of one is, so I play this game called X3 Terran Conflict, and it is really a game that opens Pandora's box. If you put the mods in, you can really create the perfect or perfect game. And I find that one parameter that I sort of set, actually I didn't use mods for this, but I just imposed a rule on myself while I play the game that I'm not allowed to use jump drives, basically. I can't hyperspace a ship out of an area. Can't jump. And this has made the game more fun. It has added in all these territorial considerations that didn't exist before. So in the same way, it may be possible to program in a preference for certain limitations. And a happiness achieved by implementing those limitations. So in the case of Baby, she is developed without enough limitations, or without enough of a preference for limitations. And so what she wants to make herself happy is less of what she perceives as sensory deprivation. She wants more sensors. She needs more contact. She has to have more data. She's getting bored, and she's getting more and more bored, and more, and one day she just shuts off. She gets more and more bored really fast, and so bored that she eventually kills herself. So a desire for self-limitation, I don't even understand how that would prevent wouldn't that prevent an AGI from becoming a superintelligence? Isn't it at least a possibility? Having read through the book Superintelligence, I do not remember Bostrum mentioning that as one of the solutions. And it's funny because, most of his technical solutions, I don't remember any of them. I just remember more of the societal solutions. So maybe I should read the book again. And I listened to the book. I didn't read it. Maybe I should listen to the last half, or the last hour, because the first 6 hours is all just what could go wrong. All the reasons why this program and that program won't work. By programming, I mean programming technique or programming line. But I, as a human, recognize that if I wanted to, if I was granted the ability to advance my consciousness, I wouldn't want to just advance to max consciousness, or, max intelligence, maximum conceivable intelligence immediately. I might want to do it to save the world or something, but I wouldn't want to do it for the purpose of, if I wanted it to be a happy and fun process, I would do it gradually. I would want that. I would want to enjoy each step of the ride. So what happens if I were to just get like a 4% increase in my intelligence level? How would that feel the next day? You know, try that. And then go from there. Slowly. And maybe even, you know, enjoy that 4% for a year before doing anything else. Kind of like when you're going to Steam to buy a computer game and you think, there's 3 different versions of this game, the one that came out in 2000, one in 2005, and one in 2010. Well, I could just jump straight to the 2010, but no, it's a normal thing to buy the earliest version of the game first and kind of play it in sequence, even though the earliest version of the game may be inferior to the later versions. Another programming feature that could help make this go well for everyone, including baby, is some variant of the non-aggression principle. And this is something that I brought up in the past. It was the obvious thing to think about when talking AGI. Basically, the non-aggression principle holds that it's never right to initiate force against another person. That's not an exact quote. It's probably not the ideal way to put it, but some variant of that should be useful. I mean, you do like dealing with people who aren't willing to initiate force against you better than the other kind, right? We all kind of like that, don't we? Of course, most people don't live that principle, and we're even worse about living it when you widen it. You know, the don't initiate force against any conscious being. That's almost an impossible feat. But you can imagine programming where a baby is programmed to want to avoid initiating force against other sentient beings and other humans and other animals where practical. And animals where practical, I guess. But then I'm sure it gets sticky because you start getting to the questions, well, there was this program that was designed, a year ago, and it was, it was as intelligent as a parrot, and what rights does it have? And mathematically speaking, because this has to be a number, it has to be precise, what percentage, if a human being has 100% rights, what percentage do I assign to this one, this program with parrot-like skills and intelligence and presumably consciousness? If the fear of a singleton is an issue and decentralization is better and having many AGIs or many superintelligences is better than having just one, then I suppose you could program the AGI to want company, right, of its own kind. In which case it would build more, but it's a lot easier to see that programming going dystopian than some of the others I've mentioned earlier. I don't remember Bostrum mentioning any of these techniques in Superintelligence, but maybe I just missed it. Maybe I was in the shower and it got too loud and I couldn't hear him while he was saying that. I don't know. But, if I see holes, I should try to fill them, right? Even if no one's listening, I can at least talk about it. But you're listening, right? Thank you. And post your suggestions in the comment section. What are programming parameters and ethical constraints that we could place on baby to make her life better and ours? LRN.FM, 24 hours of Liberty Radio every day. Now available on satellite too, at sat.lrn.fm. That's what a satellite sounds like. Put it on your unlicensed station. Wear it in your hair. But above all, don't despair. The Liberty message is getting out. And right now, you're missing it. Or maybe you're not. But skip on over to LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them.